Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Stand with us! Stand with us!
Anti-pipeline protesters surround the BC Legislature, blocking entrances. Also,
in the flight air, we are this. We're so happy.
out of Wuhan, a Coquitlam family back on home soil, and
incredible, just unbelievable, such an amazing moment.
for the 2010 torchbearers, memories of carrying the Olympic flame still burn bright.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
You are looking at a live shot of Cambie Street in Vancouver tonight. Anti-pipeline protesters blocking the intersection at Broadway and Cambie. They're voicing their support for the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and their anger at both the federal and provincial governments and the RCMP. About 200 protesters have occupied the high-traffic intersection there since about 2 o'clock this afternoon. As you can see, it's blocking major bus routes and causing commuter chaos in that part of the city. And this is not the only protest today here in BC.
They cannot and will not use militarized violence when our people are simply occupying the homelands that have been there since time immemorial.
Chaos at the BC Legislature as protesters shut down access, cutting back the usual pomp and circumstance of the Lieutenant Governor's entrance for the throne speech and cancelling Premier John Horgan's news conference on the day the government's plans for the year were revealed. Good evening. The throne speech was eventually delivered, but it was touch and go for several hours. We'll have more on the government's plans for the province later, but first, here's the CBC's Tina Lovegreen with a look at how protests in support of Wet'suwet'en demonstrators overshadowed the opening of the legislature.
Stand with us! Stand with us!
They crowded together to block every entrance and staircase to the building. Ministers were turned away or forced to wiggle their way with the help of police.
Everyone recognizes the importance and the right of a protest and a lawful protest, but when the very institutions of democracy are challenged in this way, I think it sets a very dangerous precedent.
Shutting this place down!
The protesters have camped outside the legislature since Friday to stand in support of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. But despite loud voices of opposition, there are 20 elected chiefs along the pipeline route who support the project, including most elected band councils.
I support the project, and there's lots of other Wet'suwet'ens that support the project, lots of community members, but they're afraid to voice their support or show their support because of ostracization.
But still, more disruptions. In New Hazelton, CN trails haven't budged since Thursday.
With our Wet'suwet'en brothers.
And a small group of young people in Bella Bella chained themselves to police cruisers.
No peace! No justice!
In Vancouver, this busy intersection blocked in all directions.
This is bullshit!
Some had little patience left. But after some delay, the throne speech was delivered, including a promise that reconciliation remains a top priority.
Is a matter of rights and justice. It's a journey we are on together.
But those on the streets see it differently.
There is no reconciliation.
The only way this is going to end is the RCMP leave with students.
Officers haven't left Wet'suwet'en, but the road is now clear. And Coastal GasLink says work will resume next week. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
So quite a dramatic, chaotic day at the BC Legislature. That's where the CBC's Tanya Fletcher is tonight. And Tanya, we can see the protests continuing on behind you this evening.
Absolutely. You can see there are about several hundred still behind me right now. They've quieted down a little bit, but this has been the scene from dawn to dusk. Since I arrived at 6:30 this morning, they've been camped out in front of the legislature. Around 9 o'clock, they surrounded the entire building, and that's when a number of MLAs, reporters, staffers, anyone outside couldn't get inside because the demonstrators were blocking all of the doors. Now, those of us inside were told by Legislature security and Victoria Police that we should not leave because they couldn't guarantee our safety. We knew the outdoor throne speech events would be cancelled, but then the ceremony to prorogue Parliament that was supposed to be at 10 a.m. was postponed for 3 hours as well. So it was an entirely fluid situation throughout the day. The Lieutenant Governor eventually made it inside. We still don't know exactly how. They didn't make her whereabouts, her specific whereabouts public. There was a talk she may have used the tunnel to come in. But even so, she did deliver the throne speech at 2 o'clock as scheduled. But the Premier wound up cancelling his 3:15 media availability. That never did happen. He instead sent out a statement, but no doubt in response to try at least to de-escalate the situation and avoid reporters' questions about it.
All right, well, they did eventually get around to the throne speech. Any significant details in it?
Nothing new in the way of new announcements. No, nothing unexpected. We are seeing mainly some policy-based measures that are hinted at in this blueprint. That is the throne speech as we look ahead to the spring session kicking off today. Extra protections for renters facing rent evictions. That's one thing we can expect to see more of. We're not sure exactly what form that will take, but also victims of domestic violence. They'll get 5 days paid leave from their jobs. Legislation will be introduced this spring to ban guns in schools, post-secondary institutions, and hospitals. And of course, don't think we're going to get away with this session without talking about ICBC. Legislation will have to be introduced still as a framework to the insurance overhaul as we move towards a no-fault model. So that will no doubt headline this session as well. Mike?
All right, Tanya, thanks very much. Tanya Fletcher at the Legislature tonight. And this evening, protesters are still blocking a main rail line through the north of our province. Those in support of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have blocked the line since Saturday afternoon. It's left dozens of freight trains stranded between the interior and the coast. And it's caused a slowdown at the port in Prince Rupert. And Via Rail has just canceled its trips through the region. It's not the only rail blockage, though. In Ontario, a crucial CN line has been blocked for days.
I think you made a point, and I think a lot of people have heard you. And I know I'd really like to go home, and I wonder if maybe you guys would like to go home now too, to your families.
This is our home. We are home. You're on our front lawn. We'd like you to go home too, please.
That is the scene at a Mohawk protest blockade near Belleville. More than 100 Via Rail trains between Toronto and Montreal, as well as Ottawa, have been canceled. A provincial police liaison team arrived today to talk, and the shutdown has been declared illegal, but police have not yet moved in on the encampment. Protesters say they have no intention of leaving as long as the RCMP remain on Wet'suwet'en territory. This is CN's main line, and they say it's forced them to discontinue large parts of their operations. So how did we get here? CBC journalist Chantal Belrichard has been to Wet'suwet'en territory and covered the story extensively. She has this primer on what you need to know about this conflict.
The Coastal GasLink pipeline is designed to move liquid natural gas from northeastern BC to Kitimat on the coast. It's part of an estimated $40 billion LNG project in BC. The project has signed agreements with 20 First Nations bands along the route, including 5 of 6 Wet'suwet'en band councils. But Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, recognized leaders in place before the colonial imposition of the Indian Act, do not agree. They say no pipelines can be built through their traditional territory without their consent. A recent BC Supreme Court decision, however, ruled the pipeline can go ahead, noting the project has all the necessary provincial approvals. The court instructed people they cannot physically block the company from getting to work in the territory. But Wet'suwet'en and their supporters are defying that court injunction, invoking Wet'suwet'en law. Dozens have been arrested in the territory, prompting demonstrations and blockades across the country.
The World Health Organization has announced the name of the new coronavirus.
It is COVID-19. CO stands for corona, as you know. VI stands for virus, D for disease, so COVID.
The number of people killed by COVID in China's central Hubei province has risen by 94 more deaths today and has now killed more than 1,000 people. The number of those infected around the world, more than 43,000, the majority in China, where about 60 million people remain under quarantine. The head of the UN Health Agency says the disease poses a graver threat to the world than terrorism. The WHO appealing for global cooperation and sharing of information. A Coquitlam family is thanking its lucky stars tonight. After weeks in Wuhan, Daniela Law and her daughter are back on Canadian soil tonight. The two didn't know if they would be allowed on the repatriation flight because they are permanent residents. But as Leanne Young tells us, this experience has left them feeling more Canadian than ever.
Boarding this flight has been everything Daniela Law and her daughter have wanted for weeks. When it finally touched down on Canadian soil Monday, elation.
In the flight air, we are this. We're so happy. We're so happy.
They stopped at YVR just for refueling. Up until the last minute, even Global Affairs Canada didn't know if the two would be allowed on the repatriation flight.
They said they agree us to take this flight, but they don't know. Maybe Chinese government is not allowed.
Because until they sat on that seat, there was no guarantees from anybody that they were coming home.
Monty Gisborne has been fighting for weeks to get his wife and daughter on board. The pair are permanent residents, and China only allowed Canadians or those with Canadian children to travel. The two are now happily quarantined at an army base in Ontario.
And here is a TV.
The room isn't huge, and they're in here 20 hours a day, just 4 hours to walk around in this parking lot. But no one is complaining.
She's so exciting today here. She said she wanted to stay here 1 month.
It's comfortable. The food is good.
Their first meal was sweet and sour pork. Even their flight served Chinese food, Wuhan noodles, small, welcoming touches that didn't go unnoticed.
They just make us the heart feel so warm, you know. Every people meet us, they say, "Welcome back home."
Daniela and Dominica aren't the only two British Columbians in isolation. The BC Centre for Disease Control says since last Friday, more than 250 people have been tested for COVID-19, some of them more than once. And there are no new cases, just the 4 we already know about.
And all 4 of them are recovering. Their condition is stable, and all of them are in isolation, recovering at home.
For Law and her daughter, this is home for the next 2 weeks. They already know what they want to do when they get back to Coquitlam.
I want to go to the restaurant for a long time. We have to get family. We can't go outside.
Until then, it's daily FaceTiming with Dad and a little song.
Trouble comes, and my heart lets and beat.
For all the doctors, flight crew, and volunteers who raised their spirits every step of the way. Leanne Young, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, it was a bizarre and unsettling case, a cult-like organization that physically branded its adherents and made them sex slaves for its leader. Well, now as Jason Proctor reports, former members are fighting back with a lawsuit.
At its height, Vancouver's Nexium chapter, which used to sit in this stretch of Georgia Street, was a bustling place. The group had thousands of members across North America, but then the co-founder of the Vancouver chapter, actress Sarah Edmondson, went public with allegations that she had been recruited into an inner circle of sex slaves and branded with the initials of Nexium leader Keith Raniere. She's now suing Raniere, who is awaiting sentencing in the U.S. on charges of sex trafficking, claiming emotional and financial damage for PTSD, panic attacks, and psychological breakdowns. The lawsuit also includes allegations from 28 anonymous Canadian women and 13 Canadian men. 2 of those women claim they were also recruited into the circle of slaves. One, a professional actress, claims she gave nude photos as collateral. Another Canadian woman claims she was subjected to human fright experiments during her time in Nexium, unable to sleep after she was shown graphic videos of beheadings and rape. The precise role of the men is not detailed, but the lawsuit describes a male group intended as a kind of military arm of Nexium. The plaintiffs are also suing Claire and Sarah Bronfman, the heiresses to the Seagram's liquor fortune. They're accused of financing Nexium's battles with its opponents. None of the defendants have responded to any of the claims in the lawsuit. Jason Proctor, CBC News, Vancouver.
The mayor of Calgary is here in Vancouver for a sustainability conference. All the while, his Alberta provincial counterparts are calling for a new oil sands mine and hoping for federal approval. Naheed Nenshi appeared on the early edition with Stephen Quinn this morning and asked him, why is there a perceived disconnect between Calgary and the rest of Canada?
In Alberta, in Calgary in particular, we went from having the lowest unemployment rate in the country for decades, attracting young people, particularly from across the country who want to make their lives in Calgary. We went from the lowest unemployment rate to the highest in 18 months. We went from basically 0% vacancy in our downtown core, you couldn't get an office for love or money, to 1 in 4 buildings in downtown Calgary is empty in 18 months. So here's the secret about Alberta. We will never admit it publicly, but we are secretly very proud of the fact that our prosperity allows the country to do well, and kind of like the big brother looking after the rest of the family. And so this has been incredibly...
You really believe that?
Oh, totally.
And for more of Mayor Nenshi's conversation with Stephen Quinn, go to our website, cbc.ca/BC, for the full interview. Brett Soderholm, meteorologist here. First check of the forecast. Well, you said the rain would arrive, and there it was.
It was, and definitely a little bit more heavily in some areas. I was noting earlier this afternoon, places, say like Coquitlam, Poco, Maple Ridge, there were a few heavier downpours, but if you were down in Delta, you'd be like, what rain? There really wasn't much going on there. And right now, it's still a relatively quiet pattern across the province of BC, and we can see a few showers on the radar for places like Victoria. But aside from that, it's going to be a pretty quiet one. Current temperatures, we're looking at anywhere between 6 and 7 degrees, and today, Vancouver got up to anywhere between 10 and 11 degrees, depending on the station. One of the warmest places in the whole country was North Cowichan at about 13 degrees. In terms of our overall look ahead for the next little while, we're going to be dealing with just a few clouds for tonight. Tomorrow, I would expect that sun to be able to come back, maybe not first thing in the morning, but by the afternoon for sure. And then tomorrow night, getting into the day after, well, no surprise there, we're going to be getting into a few more showers.
Oh boy. All right, Brett, thank you.
You're welcome.
And a reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs. And CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And we're now streaming this newscast for the full hour, commercial-free. Well, they were part of an epic journey 10 years ago. Coming up, why memories of carrying the Olympic flame still burn bright for the 2010 torchbearers. Yeah, thanks for staying with us. Online tonight, commercial-free during the television break. Well, as the coronavirus, or COVID as it's now being called, continues, one of the most common questions we've been seeing is if it can be spread by someone who isn't showing symptoms. It's been a controversial question ever since a report in the New England Journal of Medicine claimed an asymptomatic woman triggered a chain of infections near Munich, Germany. Infectious disease specialist Dr. Isaac Bogoch explains how the report got it wrong.
Based on a very high-profile study that was recently conducted, the report suggested that the virus was transmitted from someone with no symptoms to other people. A person that traveled from China to Germany for a meeting, this person reportedly felt well, and then on her return trip back to China, it was reported that she subsequently developed some signs and symptoms suggestive of an infection, and indeed this person did test positive for the novel coronavirus. After that, people that were close contacts of the traveler from China who were still in Germany developed some signs and symptoms of infection, and it was found that they too were infected with this coronavirus. After the report came out, it seemed to be discovered that people that were involved with the creation of this report actually never spoke with the individual who came down with the infection directly. After some deeper digging, it turns out that the individual who flew in from China to Germany indeed had symptoms. And it was reported that she had some muscle aches and pains and wasn't feeling that well and was even taking some medications to suppress her fevers. With social media in everybody's palms, you know, there always is the potential for the circulation and, of course, the amplification of misinformation and pseudoscience. So I think it's a good idea to pick a few reputable sources and stick with a few reputable sources. In general, when we're dealing with respiratory infections, it's usually the case that people who have symptoms, people who are coughing, for example, are just more likely to transmit the infection from one person to another. I also think we have to remember that symptoms can be very broad. Some people can have symptoms and be very, very sick. But we're also hearing about people at the much more mild end of the spectrum with symptoms, that they don't even need to seek medical care because their symptoms are more of a nuisance rather than requiring hospitalization. One of the concerns is it might be challenging to control an epidemic if people are walking around with mild symptoms transmitting the infection, because it's hard to find those individuals. It's hard to identify them and isolate them or prevent them from spreading the infection to others. With emerging data, we'll see what proportion of individuals fall into that category.
Olympic 10-year anniversary coverage coming up in just a sec. Well, on this day 10 years ago, the Olympic torch relay was in the final hours of an epic 106-day odyssey. 12,000 torchbearers carried the flame, and in many ways, it touched all Canadians. I caught up with some of the torchbearers, and for them, the memories of carrying the flame are still burning bright.
The Olympic torch is carried by Rick Hansen.
Incredible, just unbelievable. Such an amazing moment.
I'm sure, you know, he enjoyed the whole experience.
Once in a lifetime opportunity. I was very grateful.
We like to kind of call it the most unlikely torchbearer story.
An unlikely story because on February 5th, 2010, Erin Boisvert had no idea she'd be carrying the Olympic torch. She was teaching that morning at an elementary school in Whistler when an official from the torch relay team showed up.
Somebody had dropped out, and they asked our teacher in charge at the time if there was anyone on staff who would be a good fit to be in the relay, and I was chosen.
Dressed in a men's extra-large torch relay tracksuit, Boisvert carried the torch through the Bayshores neighborhood with students, family, and friends lining the route.
Just so grateful that I was able to be a part of the relay.
Turns out Boisvert was carrying something else. During the games, she learned she was expecting her first child. Daniel Martin of the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation in North Vancouver was 17 when he carried the torch. Martin passed the flame to the late Chief Leonard George at the entrance to Kate's Park.
How big it was, you know, to do that. I mean, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But I'm sure, you know, he enjoyed the whole experience.
Martin's torch, uniform, and mittens are proudly displayed at the family's home. As the torch made its way to Vancouver for the opening ceremony, it was also carried by celebrities, Canadian athletes, and Olympians. Joy Farah was on the Canadian rowing team at the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. She ran with the torch in Coquitlam.
Unbelievably, just ecstatic. Just knowing the historical once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I was very grateful.
Farah's torch is on display at Delta Municipal Hall, not far from where she lives. But she has a souvenir torch and her uniform, signed by, among others, Wayne Gretzky and skier Kathy Kreiner Phillips. As was the case almost everywhere the torch went, people lined the streets to see it. Organizing committee boss John Furlong believes the attitude of the community changed in those final days of the relay.
When it was coming into the last sort of 24, 36 hours, the public started to realize, oh my goodness. So the people of the city were just waiting and waiting and waiting. And in many ways, they became the difference makers.
There was also wild speculation about who would be the final torchbearer, the one to light the cauldron at BC Place Stadium. In the end, there turned out to be 5, including Paralympian and BC's man in motion, Rick Hansen. But Hansen had to audition for his part. The ceremony's producer didn't think he'd be able to wheel up a steep ramp to the stadium's elevated floor.
As I looked at the ramp and I go, it's a good one. Thermal drive, Great Wall of China, but I think maybe we can do it. And so up we went and made it.
And he made it again opening night, a moment to cherish.
When I got to the top, it was just such a sense of pride and joy and feeling the energy of our country.
And tomorrow, February 12th, of course, the 10th anniversary, hard to believe, of the 2010 Winter Olympic Games. And at 8:45 tomorrow morning, they are going to relight the cauldron at Jack Pool Plaza in downtown Vancouver. 8:45 tomorrow morning. Well, everyone remembers the glory moments of the 2010 Olympics, but how many recall the Games actually starting? As Karen Larson reports, the joyful kickoff to the big celebration was anything but.
The legacy of the 2010 Olympics has a lot to do with this. And this. And of course, this. But it's worth remembering the Games didn't always have public sentiment on side.
I'm probably going to stay as far away as possible from downtown when the actual Olympics are here.
In the lead up, there were problems. The weather wasn't at all wintry.
It's warm, it's very warm, yes, but nice.
And the rain, so much rain. And so little snow. It had to be pushed and trucked and helicoptered in from other peaks, and then from Manning Park, 200 kilometers away, all in order to cover the freestyle skiing and snowboard venues on Cypress Mountain. But all those issues shrunk in significance after the tragedy of Georgian luger Nodar Kumaratashvili.
It's been the saddest 24 hours in the Olympic Games since Munich.
Killed in a training crash on the day of the opening ceremony.
We are heartbroken beyond words.
The death added to the collective anxiety already hanging over the first days of the 2010 Olympics. And no one felt it more than mogul skier Jennifer Heil.
For sure, there was tremendous pressure. I mean, I couldn't actually digest half my food for almost 2 years.
Competing on the very first day of the Games, Heil was expected to defend her Olympic gold medal and break through as the first Canadian athlete to ever win gold on home soil. It didn't happen. She finished second, cried tears of sorrow, and accepted the silver with a smile.
I wasn't able to celebrate that medal for years, to be honest. It was a struggle for me because I didn't know there were other colors of medals.
But in sport, as in life, things can turn around, and they did.
I think it's just we all settled into it. You know, the athletes were prepared. We went out and those gold medals rolled in and they never stopped till the end.
Heil says the real legacy is that despite early stumbles, Canada pulled off a great Games, something that 10 years and 1 silver medal later is a great source of pride. Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
She has scored the most goals of any soccer player, male or female. Coming up, we're going to talk with Christine Sinclair about her career and how she hopes to give back.
I'm in the domestic arrivals area at Vancouver International Airport, and things are going pretty smoothly as athletes, fans, volunteers, and media are all arriving here just days before the Games.
Time of a lifetime. Chance of a lifetime, I should say.
This Olympic volunteer is tired but still full of enthusiasm after almost 12 hours of flights and layovers to arrive here from Ottawa.
Still waiting for a ride now.
Okay. We're here for the Olympics. These Olympic fans are staying the month with tickets to speed skating, figure skating, and the closing ceremony.
Well, we've been planning it for, what, 3 years?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yes. Now they're off to hop on public transit. But that's nothing the athletes need to worry about as they arrive with winter parkas and carts of skis. There are hosts lined up to greet them and a line of SUVs from the Olympic fleet with trunks open for luggage. Fans are waiting too for the Canadian stars like Patrick Chan. He touched down at YVR just after 1 today.
It's almost surreal. I think it's the first time I've been nervous coming off a plane because I know it was coming up, and it's really cool to be here.
Some fans have been coming here day after day to get autographs from athletes and cheer them on as their one chance to see the stars in person.
I tried to get tickets, I couldn't get any. It was very difficult.
YVR expects this energy to just build throughout the week as there's a steady stream of arrivals. The travel agents warn us the real crunch time at the airport will be the day after the Olympics, when so many people try to leave at the same time. Lisa Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver International Airport.
Quick look at some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Anti-pipeline protesters surrounded the BC Legislature, blocking entrances. Ceremonies marking the start of the spring session had to be altered or postponed.
In the flight air, we are this. We're so happy. We're so happy.
Finally, out of Wuhan, China, and on Canadian soil. The Coquitlam family is out of the coronavirus hot zone. They came back on a repatriation flight, and they're thankful to be back home.
Once in a lifetime opportunity. I was very grateful.
And on the eve of the 10th anniversary of the Vancouver Olympics, the flame still burns bright for BC's torchbearers. So certainly an important week in sports history in Vancouver, and also for one of BC's most decorated athletes. Today, the City of Vancouver declared January 29th Christine Sinclair 185 Day, the day she scored her record-breaking goal, the most a player has ever scored for their country. She spoke to BC Today host Michelle Elliott about what a relief it was to break that record.
You said that goal 185 had kind of been on your mind for the past year leading up, and I'm just wondering, what still stays with you from that moment?
I mean, I definitely have the picture of the ball hitting the back of the net, and just this sense of relief, because I play team sport, and the goal record was definitely something that was like weighing on myself, something that my teammates were bringing up, something that the media was asking every time there was, any interview, and I didn't want it to be the focus come the big games, the actual games that qualified us for the Olympics. So a relief to get it over with, and very special to be able to celebrate it with my teammates.
And what does it mean to you now to be preparing for Tokyo with that under your belt?
Yeah, it's nice to just be able to focus on playing soccer, to not have any like stress or pressure in front of goal, just to be able to help the team win and make sure we're at our peak come this summer.
What was the best response you got?
Oh, the best response. So my teammates, Sophie Schmidt, put together this amazing video that we watched after the game, and it was pretty much all my current teammates, past teammates, professional teammates, just saying congratulations. People I hadn't seen in like 10 years. It was incredible. Definitely shed some tears watching that video.
And there's been so much celebration, and of course, a lot of young athletes so look up to you. What's it like for you to be such a role model?
It's something I've definitely had to like grow into, just because it's not the most comfortable thing for me, but it's a role I take very seriously. It's probably my most important thing I am now, which is to show these young kids that anything's possible, that with hard work, dedication, you can reach those dreams. When I was a youngster, I couldn't dream of playing for Canada and playing in the Olympics because it wasn't possible. And now these young players, I mean, anything is possible for them if they put in the work.
And do you see that as a big part of your legacy? I mean, what do you hope your legacy will be?
Yeah, just hopefully that I help change the sport of soccer here in Canada and globally, that I was a part of that shift to where now opportunities for women are there, whether it's overseas, here in North America. I mean, you can go play professionally wherever you want, and people will come watch and pay to come watch you. And it's been a journey, and it's been a wild ride.
How many more goals do you see for yourself?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, the second that 185th went in, people were like, so when are you going to get to 200? I'm like, oh my gosh, give me a break. So we'll go one at a time.
Give me a moment.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And at 6:36, there's a live shot at Cambie Street tonight. Anti-pipeline protests still occupying the intersection of Broadway and Cambie. They've been there since about 2 this afternoon. Brett has your full forecast coming next. You may remember last month we introduced you to a group of office workers interested in going vegan for 30 days. The so-called Veganuary has come to a close, but before they go back to meat and cheese, Jesse Johnston of our CBC Impact team swung by to see if they feel any healthier.
It isn't Christmas morning, and there were no presents in those boxes. But after 30 days of plant-based eating,
that's basically spinach, broccoli, so a lot of protein, a lot of vegetables, and as healthy as you can possibly get.
the employees at Dr. Raj Atarawala's MRI clinic say, this feels like a holiday meal of sorts, complete with meat and cheese.
The cheesiest one I can get.
Lots of cheese.
Worth it.
We met Atarawala and his team a month ago when they started Veganuary. Yep, Veganuary, an entire month of plant-based eating. They all tested their blood, fat levels, and body mass indexes.
The visceral fat that I have is way too high.
Fast forward 30 days, and they're all doing the same test to see if veganism has made them any healthier.
Your body fat actually went up.
Atarawala lost 8 pounds, which is great, but most of that weight was muscle.
Like I'm a skinnier guy than I was before, but I'm fatter than I was before.
Yeah.
Exact opposite of what you would want.
Shopping and meal planning was a challenge for most, and most admit they'd often substitute unhealthy, carbohydrate-rich foods for meat.
I have to think of like, okay, where can I get something that like I can just get quickly that's vegan, or even out at like a bar. Yeah. Like, what can I get that's not yam fries?
Yeah.
Atarawala says his nut allergy made it hard to get enough protein, and he didn't change his fitness routine, which explains the loss of muscle.
You were always exercising. I never exercised. And so as a result, diet alone won't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's I think the biggest thing, that diet alone won't do it.
I think that was the main thing that really came out of this. And I'll definitely just think about what's going in my body a little bit more.
After 30 days, no one plans to become vegans full time, but they've all discovered they can do with less meat and a healthier lifestyle.
Oh boy, what a comparison.
Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that was an original story brought to us by you, our CBC viewers and listeners and readers. And if you have a story you'd like our Impact team to take a look at, just send us an email, impact@cbc.ca.
The weather update is brought to you by The Body Shop that always takes you back to your happy place. BC's favorite, Craftsman Collision, Air Miles, and Bigger Smiles.
Did they seem really happy tucking into the pizza?
I think that was a lot of enthusiasm.
Was it?
For some. I noticed one guy in particular. I particularly felt bad for the one guy. If he had a nut allergy, that would make going vegan really quite difficult.
Really difficult.
But I applaud them for their efforts. Would you ever do something like that to try that out?
No.
No. And honestly...
There's my answer, being honest.
Yeah, nor would I. That's pretty settles it there. Anyways, our weather, though, across the province, it's not nearly as exciting as it could be, but that's probably okay. And I'll show you why. Let's take a first look, though, at what this morning was like. No real rays of sunshine, shall we say, but we did see a lot of rolling clouds kind of coming from various directions. A few showers, yeah, one of those days, but there is going to be a little bit of a change up in our weather when it comes to tomorrow and the forecast that we're going to be dealing with. For the next couple of hours, really, our story is just going to be a simple one, largely going to be cloudy, and then occasionally over to parts of the extreme eastern Fraser Valley. We may see a few spotty showers, but in general, tomorrow is a very benign weather day. So that just means you can expect near seasonal temperatures, very light winds, and really just not a whole lot of precipitation across the province. You're going to see that no matter really where you are, there isn't a lot going on in BC. Worth mentioning that I am closely watching a storm system over toward Alaska that will eventually be making its way down to the south coast, but it's going to take some time. This is going to be bringing rain to Haida Gwaii, Prince Rupert, and then certainly snow for our northern portions of the province, including Prince George. But if you go anywhere south and east of that, all the way from Vancouver to Cranbrook and maybe over to Williams Lake, there is no precipitation in sight at all. And our long-range forecast, well, it's going to be following that same system. We're going to be watching it come on shore most of Thursday Thursday for us. That's going to be bringing widespread rain to the south coast. A bit of a break on Friday, and then we're going to get back into that soggier pattern once again from Friday night into Saturday. And the temperatures overall very close to seasonal for the next few days. And if you look at our 5-day forecast here, you're going to notice a trend. First of all, temperatures very close to seasonal, 7, 6, 8 degrees largely, and then a few days of sun followed by rain, and then sun and then rain, and that's going to be the trend. So it's not quite a traditional winter pattern, but definitely something that is not certainly as soggy as we've seen from last month.
Well, we'll take it. Thanks, Brett.
No problem.
As many as 11 people will kill themselves by suicide every day in Canada, the majority of them men. How one Vancouver man is trying to give back after suffering from mental health challenges. That's next. It is a startling statistic. Each day here in Canada, an average of 11 people will die by suicide. That's about 4,000 deaths a year, and the vast majority of those men. The CBC's David Common tells the story of a Vancouver man who felt there was no turning back, but is now helping others get off the path of despair and find hope.
That was a really tough time. And I just felt like I kind of had to give up. Like I felt like I was just like putting myself out of my misery.
It's a strange thing to drive over the bridge you once jumped off of. More than 9 stories straight down.
I got to the point where I just understood that I was sick, but I didn't understand that that feeling wasn't permanent. I got to the point where I thought suicide was inevitable. And then once it was inevitable in my mind, then I was just living and suffering until I did it.
That Josh Bahari did and survived is incredible. And while in hospital, he realized a part of him still wanted to live.
I had broken like 6 ribs. I had 5 hairline fractures in like the wing part of my vertebrae, like several mild brain contusions. But in there, I kind of got a glimpse of like what it felt like to be normal again. because the emotions lifted for like a little bit. And that was like the first time I felt anything positive in months.
That feeling fueled his desire to do what he's doing now, helping others like him emerge from what began slowly for Josh a decade ago.
My thoughts were getting really negative. I was tired all the time. I wasn't sleeping well. I had like, my muscles just felt weak and I just felt drained, like I had no energy. And then once like I couldn't sleep anymore, that's when it was like impossible for me to hide what was going on.
Yet Josh still didn't get help, didn't talk to friends about what was going on. Like most men, he stayed quiet.
I didn't even really realize that I was like trying to man up or trying to like be tough, but it was just a part of me, like, oh, I have to figure this out on my own. I have to solve this, you know? And I can't ask for help. I don't want to. So we have one news story I just got submitted for us. I'll be reviewing that.
Having survived a suicide attempt, Josh is intent on ending the stigma and helping others. Josh joined up with Dr. John Ogrodnichuk, a psychiatry professor at UBC, to work on Heads Up Guys, a website dedicated to helping men deal with mental health issues. Josh even shares his own story on the site.
Josh brings a lot of elements to the table. Even more profoundly, he brings his lived experience, and that is so crucial to making sure that what we're putting out there as far as a helping resource really speaks to the men who are going through what he went through. Men have a really high suicide rate, and it's about 3 to 4 times higher than that among women, and not just in Canada or North America, but really globally we're seeing this phenomenon. So we wanted to address that.
Although men die by suicide at a higher rate, when it comes to seeking help, they're much lower.
A lot of guys feel alone in their experience of depression and suicidal thought, so we want to break that down and say this is actually pretty common among men. You're not alone.
Since its launch 5 years ago, there have been 1.5 million visits to the site. The key words on how men find Heads Up Guys illustrate the stakes.
Every day we're getting more and more email from visitors, some very impactful, profound messages. You know, one that really sticks out in my mind, it was very succinct, and it said, I just read your article about suicide, pretty sure it just saved my life. Thank you for giving me hope.
One of those men is high-end bartender Julian Dobko, who saw himself reflected on the Heads Up site.
You can read these stories of these guys, and you might even realize a lot of them are like you. And when you see yourself, it's like, oh, wait a minute, hold on now. Like, this person's like me. I can do this. I can reach out for help. I can stand up. And I think too, when you see somebody on there standing up and being strong, and you think, oh, I'm weak. Wait a minute, but I think they're strong. Maybe I'm strong if I come out. And that's sort of how it happened for me.
Coming out of the shadows and asking for help, a good reminder of the barriers stopping men like Julian from talking to anyone about mental well-being. Josh's own recovery has been gradual. Nothing is a quick fix, and healing comes with periodic setbacks. But he feels he's on the right path, and he's more comfortable talking. He wants all men to feel that same openness.
The main thing that I want guys to know, there's no like point where it's just like there's no turning back, you know? Like I got to the point where I thought there was no turning back, and somehow I'm still here and I'm doing better.
He's traveling regularly, snapping photos along the way, all part of an extraordinary journey, one playing out inside his own mind. David Common, CBC News, Vancouver.
To another story of mental health, this time coupled with addiction. A Regina mother says her son has fallen through the cracks in not one, but 2 provinces. Keith Cathcart was in and out of both jail and hospital in Saskatchewan. And as Bonnie Allen reports, now he's stuck in the same cycle here in BC.
It's terrifying as a mother because you love your kid so much.
Pam Sanderson is so worried about her son, she's flying from Regina to Victoria. That's where 23-year-old Keith Cathcart wanders the streets. He has mental health issues and he's addicted to crystal meth and heroin.
And I get those phone calls in the middle of the night where he's terrified. He's outside, he's freezing.
She's scared for her son's safety and the safety of others.
I think, what if he hurts somebody? And I've done everything in my power to try and bring attention to the fact that he needs help. He would cuddle with me, and I mean, he's just such a sweetheart.
Cathcart was born extremely premature with a cognitive disability. As a teen, he got into fights and spiraled into a life of drugs. He was in and out of jail and treatment. Mental health issues escalated. Cathcart would frequently slide into a psychosis.
He has hurt me on several occasions, threw a knife at me and it hit the wall, thank God. Punched me in the face when I was driving down the highway.
A few years ago, Sanderson and her son moved from Victoria to Regina. He got psychiatric treatment and stabilized for a while, but then returned to street drugs. Cathcart got in trouble with a gang and had to flee back to BC. Studies show as many as half of people who experience a mental illness also have an addiction, and as many as 3/4 of people in drug treatment facilities also have a mental disorder.
They don't show up for appointments. They don't have a routine in their day.
This mental health therapist says the current system expects too much of people who have both issues.
I think we have to think outside the box. We have to be creative around this. Is a very high needs and very highly vulnerable population that is not getting service.
Sanderson planned her trip to Victoria with high expectations, hoping to arrange supportive housing and services for her son. But she doesn't even get to see him. Cathcart punched a worker at a youth shelter before she arrived and landed back in jail. And another surprise, there's a no-contact order from 2018 that prohibits Cathcart from even seeing his mother. It's from the last time he assaulted her. But she wants to see him.
I went in there, they shut me down. It hurts. He's still my son, no matter what he does, and no matter how sick he is.
Now they can't even talk on the phone. Sanderson heads home, feeling helpless. Bonnie Allen, CBC News, Regina.
All right, yesterday we told you about Bella, the prize-winning German Shepherd. Well, get ready to meet. There it is, Hollywood Cosmopolitan. That's next. Okay, just one day after a Chilliwack dog won Best Female of its breed, we told you about Bella yesterday, another BC dog has gone one step further at the world's most prestigious dog show.
Deerhounds floating, and that's very typical for their breed, that light-footed float.
Yeah, it's all about that light-footed float. That's Holyrood Cosmopolitan, a Scottish deerhound named best in its breed. The Kamloops-based dog fell just short of making it to tonight's Best in Show competition. She placed second in the hound group.
Another lovely BC dog. They're pretty cute.
They're huge.
Yeah, that is a lot of dog to have in one area.
There you go.
Graceful, though.
Congratulations. All right, that's our podcast tonight. Dan is here at 11 right after the National. Have a great night.
Take care.